Ah, what a beautiful day to make terrible content. This is Raz reminding you to mask up, get in your daily dose of cardio, and sanitize the unclean. Only together can we defeat the virus. Hey people, Raz here. I'm about to do something that is so taboo, so illicit, so forbidden, that many before me have perished even attempting doing something similar. I'm going to have an opinion on the internet. Oh, I know, it's hard to believe, but I feel like a recent poll Arthur put up has forced my hand and compelled me to make this video. So, to catch everyone up, Arthur put up a poll today asking if Cobi's World War II models should be built in 1/35 or 1/28 scale in the future. Because of this, I had to halt production on the next 8 videos that I'm working on to make this emergency video. For those of you waiting for the mock tour video, I'm currently in the process of recording voiceover for it. The script ended up being 39 pages long so far, so don't worry. It's on its way. Long videos just take a long time to make. I think it'll be done by April or May at this point, so stay tuned. For everyone else who's still here, this video was an emergency, so I wanted to make it right away. If the editing in this video seems rushed, that's because it is. I wanted to address this issue before the poll closed if possible, so I can help everyone make an informed decision. Because I feel like there's a lot of misinformation out there regarding the 1/35 scale, and I wanted to try to clear it up.
I can get Obama's emergency alerts through this.
After building 14 MOCs in 1/35 scale, 15 MOCs in 1/48 scale, and 75 MOCs in 1/28 scale, I feel that I have a pretty good grasp on the limitations of each scale. So today I'd like to go over why 1/35 is a terrible idea and why Cobi should stick to their current scale. So, to start out, I feel I need to explain what these different scales actually are, because not many Cobi buyers are model makers. Model making has been around almost as long as humans have, but models as we know them today started to pop up around the 1700s with the advent of lead soldiers. Before this, models were usually used for armies or engineers, but now they were used to disappoint your parents.
This is $50 worth of Warhammer. This is $700 worth of Warhammer. And this is a $2,500 Warhammer army.
Most toy soldiers were made on the same rough scale, so everything looked relatively similar to their real-life counterparts. The standard scale for most toy soldiers has roughly been 1/32 scale. As the years went on, things like trains, cars, planes, and tanks started to get made into models as well. Because of this, more standard scales were adopted over time. So let's fast forward to the 1930s and 40s. A company from the land of Vikings and terrible beer invented a little-known block, which we know today as Lego. Lego's scale was arbitrary from the beginning, but it was uniform. The idea was that 6 bricks of 2x4 studs can be combined in 915,103,765 ways, allowing the user to build whatever they imagined. Because of this standard scale, Lego has a lot of limitations on how small things can be built. The smaller the vehicle, the more impossible it becomes to adapt. So let's be clear, Lego from the beginning was not meant as a scale modeling solution. It was always meant to be a child's toy. In 1992, a wonderful company in Poland by the name of Cobi started making building block sets that were compatible with Lego pieces and used the same block standard and minifig standard that Lego used. So, now that we know the short history of building blocks and scale modeling, let's dive into the scale itself. In the 1970s, Lego adopted its standard scale and standard figurines. Lego's figures are built to a height of 1/43 scale and a width of 1/24 scale. They would be comparable to a 4-foot human if sized up. Some people also round these scales and say LEGO figures are approximately 1/42nd scale, which is inaccurate, but LEGO were the ones who built their figures to a stupid scale, so that's not really our fault now, is it? Cobi, the brand that I'm discussing today, based their figures on the same standard scale, so they would be compatible with LEGO. Other companies like Mega Bloks or Mega Constructs or whatever the heck they want to change their name to next went for 1/35th scale mini action figures, which I would argue are the best figures in the industry. So, taking all that into account, the figure scale is a pretty moot point because LEGO chose the scale of their blocks and figures for an arbitrary reason and didn't think that dense, brainless morons like me would be arguing about stuff like this on the internet. That means to make an accurate tank using Cobi's current minifigures, the tank would need to be approximately 1/43rd scale, which I thought sounded small until I put the figures next to a 1/48th scale tank that Cobi built and compared them to actual photos from World War II. Hilariously, since these minifigs would be comparable to a 4-foot short king, they have to make their tanks 1/48th scale to make them look right next to the figures. So, now that that's out of the way, let's discuss why Cobi's fanbase is so obsessed with 1/35th scale. There is literally only one reason anyone cares about 1/35th scale, and that reason is Brickmania. Way back in the year 1999, when I was still in grade school, these guys were doing my dream job in building World War II themed Legos. They chose their golden ratio 1/35th scale and have been building most of their models to that scale ever since. Why did they choose this scale? Well, it was the smallest you could make the tanks and still have features like interiors, working hatches, and tracks. Also, it was cheaper for them since LEGO charges a lot for their bricks. Over time, Brickmania tanks have gained a reputation of being overpriced garbage due to their inability to roll.
It doesn't roll the best.
Slightly rotate, but again, this is not something I would be rolling around the carpet.
Lack of basic features like an opening turret or movable gun. Lack of detail, delicate builds.
Oh, well, interior.
Wow, look at that.
Ridiculous prints that fall off as soon as the figures move, and a refusal to switch to any other block brands to cut costs, which causes all of their models to look chunky and full of studs, unlike Cobi's buttery smooth finish. I, for one, would argue that Brickmania are pioneers, but kind of a relic at this point.
I did way back in 2003. Long time ago. Long time ago.
Ages ago.
Before most of you guys were born, I was making Panthers. So before anybody was making Panthers, I was making Panthers.
Nice.
Out of
Original
Lego.
master builder.
They've refused to adapt in the last 20 years they've been doing this, and are losing market space to Cobi and other brands because of this. Buying a single tiger from Brickmania would cost $450. And buying a tiger from Cobi costs just $54. That means I can buy roughly 8 Cobi tigers for the price of one Brickmania tiger. How do they justify this? By making fun of other brands and putting their models on a pedestal. Like, listen to this shit. He actually calls this model a museum piece.
Obviously, you know, Brickmania is top of the top, the best of the best. This stuff is cool within its own right.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you're a collector of Brickmania things and need something for baby cousin to
Right.
touch and play with, and you know.
A lot of us have like younger siblings, like and you know, maybe they want to get into the hobby, but you don't want them messing with your stuff, or you know, this would be kind of a good entry point, I think, for a lot of that.
Yeah.
Or even it's just if you have kids and again they're wanting to, like, they have their eyes on your Tiger 131. There might be a more reasonable option out there for them.
Yeah, I've said a couple of times on Brickmania TV when we've been looking at different like Brickmania kits actually that, oh, this one is a sandbox kit because it's so durable.
Sure.
Well, nothing Brickmania is actually something that you would want to bring into a sandbox because it's Brickmania. However, the same does not
That
go
actually is
for
a
all the things. This could legitimately be a sandbox.
Yeah.
You have fun putting it together, and then you can go drive it through the ranks.
Yeah.
I'm not going to call them a minifigure, but you know, you can do it with your little action figures and stuff, and actually, you know, put them outdoors and not feel like you need to touch them with
Sure.
white gloves. But like, you know, you buy something that's Brickmania even close to the side, that is a display piece that is museum quality and putting it high up on a shelf where no one can touch it.
Yeah.
Overall, I don't think Brickmania is going to be around in 10 years if they don't quickly adapt and start switching to a different block provider like Cobi, who not only makes better looking pieces designed specifically for what they are trying to do, but they're cheaper as well. Instead, Brickmania is convinced that they do better than everyone else when they really don't. Not to mention, LEGO as a company has been strongly anti-war and anti-military brick, so they will not get any support or get any cheaper unless they start using a different brick manufacturer. Cobi, multiple times over the years, has proven that they are willing to fill this niche in the market, and are willing to do it much better and much cheaper than anyone else. Also, they just look objectively better, which I know are fighting words, but good God, do you have eyes? This looks way better than this. That is just an objective fact.
Boom, bam, bop, bada bop, boom, pow.
The reality of the situation is that a lot of the people who you see demanding 1/35th scale are people who can't afford Brickmania tanks, and many of them were Brickmania fanboys before they ever came to the Cobi community. I know because I was one of them. The only reason that they want this scale specifically is that Brickmania has put in their heads that 1/35th scale looks better next to the figurines. Which isn't even true, because 1/43rd scale would be accurate, and 1/48 looks almost perfect. So, up next, let's discuss the other reason so many people want 1/35th scale, the MOC Builders. This is an area I feel I'm actually qualified to talk to because I built over 100 MOCs at this point, so I can tell just by looking at a picture how accurate it is in scale, how well it'll roll, and how delicate it'll be. When I see 1/35th MOCs the community is posting online, I notice a ton of major deal breakers for me. The main issues I see are how delicate the MOCs are, how some of them may not roll, how their main gun doesn't go up or down, how many of them can't fit a figurine anywhere in the tank, and how a lot of them aren't even built to 1/35th scale at all. Now, I want to preface this by saying I do not think any of these MOC builders are bad in the very least. I actually picked them because they are the best examples in the entire Cobi community of how to build a good MOC. I respect the hell out of these guys, and I think they all do amazing work. While the rest of this segment may sound like criticism, I assure you it is not. This is to prove a point to the Cobi community at large and not to bash these guys in any way, shape, or form. With that out of the way, let's jump into it. And I prepared a very special musical number for this part. Enjoy. As you can see, many of the 1/35th MOCs are delicate, a lot of them won't be able to roll without their tracks falling off, some are not 1/35th scale at all, and most of them have no working hatches or lack the ability for their main gun to elevate and depress. I'm not saying any of these MOCs are bad, in fact many of them look better than my own, but in my opinion this is why 1/28th scale is inherently better suited to using LEGO style blocks, because you can build a moving gun, hatches, and working tracks into the MOC without it becoming delicate. Anyways, up next we're going to take a look at the scale Cobi is building to. Something else that I've noticed is that Cobi and Brickmania aren't building to a true scale either. Typically, their sets are slightly bigger in order to fit soldiers or to add more detail. I see why they do this. I mean, it's inherently dumb to demand a perfect scale out of a building material that doesn't allow it, but some of these are just way off, especially in the height department. So to prove my point, what I did is compare the real tank to the Cobi model and then determine what their scale was versus the actual size of the tank. I got every real tank's measurements from Tank Encyclopedia or Wikipedia. I got every model's measurements from the Cobi website and the scale using an online scale converter tool. All measurements were converted into millimeters, because measuring using feet is a fetish and not a real measurement system. Also, just for fun, I'm going to compare them to Brickmania's 1/35th scale version so you can see the difference in cost and detail when you switch between scales. So, without further ado, let's begin. So, now that we're done looking at Cobi Scale, I'd like to debunk a few other arguments I've seen on Facebook and Reddit. The first argument being that Cobi can just make smaller parts. I mean, yeah, I guess they can make some smaller, more specialized parts, but they're already building as small as Lego pieces allow them to. There are two reasons why I think that's a bad idea. The main reason is that more parts equals more money. So, for some reason, building block companies like to base the cost of their sets on price per part rather than the amount of ABS plastic actually used. I think this has to do with the manufacturing process, the cost of labor, and the licensing on each brick. The other issue I see is that the tracks and suspension can only get so small before they stop rolling, and it's harder to make turrets that have hatches and guns that move up and down at 1/35th scale, just like what we saw in the box section of this video. So my biggest fear is that we will end up paying the same price or more for smaller, more delicate sets if we switch to the scale permanently. The next argument I see is that Cobi is currently making 1/35th scale cars and tanks, so it shouldn't be that difficult. This is completely false, and the only people that are making this comparison are people who have never built MOCs before. So, when you're forced to build to a scale, you can only build vehicles that look good in that scale. Some vehicles, like the Sherman, Tiger, and Panther, are easy to transition into 1/35th scale because they are bigger tanks. But other vehicles, like armored cars, tankettes, and utility trailers, are almost non-functional at true 1/35th scale. This is what I call building a set piece, because it is no longer a functioning vehicle at this point. A great example of this is the CV33 that Bartek made, and here is my 1/27th scale version. As you can see, mine has working hatches, movable guns, and rolling tracks. Bartek's does not. And this is not because he's a bad builder either, because he isn't. It's because he chose to build in 1/35th scale. You can see how the tank literally can't roll, and there's almost no room for soldiers. Another cool comparison is Stanislaus' Kubelwagen versus Brickmania's Kubelwagen. So, Stanislaus built to true 1/35th scale, and as you can see, there's no room for soldiers to sit side by side. But Brickmania widened their model by one block so soldiers could sit side by side. So, in this case, Brickmania literally abandoned 1/35th scale for functionality, which I think makes a lot more sense because, again, these are not models, these are toys. Lastly, let's look at my least favorite model to come out in 2021, the DAC Opel Blitz. As you can see, the soldier that came with the vehicle doesn't actually fit in the vehicle. You can also see this on their other Opel too. If you open it up, you'll notice that the steering wheel has been moved to the center of the vehicle, and that there's no seating or detailing inside. Again, this is what you're asking for when you're telling Cobi to switch to 1/35th scale. And don't even get me started on how bad that Pack 40 was. I mean, Brickmania talks about this constantly on their YouTube channel. You can only get so small before the set stops rolling and soldiers no longer fit in the tank.
It's cool that this thing rolls like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's tricky to get tracks to roll smoothly.
Yeah, even the Lego ones, I agree.
When it's all said and done, I think most people asking for 1/35th scale just don't understand what they're actually asking for. It's not Cobi's fault that these vehicles don't work well, it's the scale's fault. Another argument I've seen is that Brickmania does it, so why can't Cobi? Well, I would argue that Brickmania sucks. Their tanks lack basic features, they don't always roll, they lack playability, they cost way too much, and their insistence to put interiors on most of their tanks causes their models to be so delicate that they break when you try to pick them up.
The shaping is nice, except it's more for display. The only thing you can really do is just open the hatches, because I can take these off, which I'll do.
So there, I took out the couple roof pieces, and 5 minutes later, yes, 5 minutes, because in the process of taking that off, the front fell apart and I had to just rebuild it again.
At the end of the day, if you want Brickmania, just go buy Brickmania. You're obviously not a fan of what Cobi is doing. You're only here because Brickmania costs too much. And forcing another block manufacturer to make models in your scale just because Brickmania costs too much is the biggest cope I have ever seen in my life. Lastly, the biggest reason is that the figurines don't look good next to the tank. This is true. 1/43rd scale tall figurines do look small when compared to a 1/28th or 1/32nd scale tank. But this argument basically debunks itself. We've already established that Lego is not a modeling solution. It is a toy, and the scale is inconsistent because of that. Lego block scale limits how small pieces can go, and the figurines are built to an arbitrary 1/43rds tall and 1/24ths wide. Honestly, I think making the figurines bigger is the fix to this problem, not making the models smaller. I would argue that Mega Construct's 1/35th size figurines look much better than Cobi or Lego, and would provide a much more accurate soldier next to the tank, since they are already roughly 1/35th scale. And here's some pictures from Cobi's Facebook group that demonstrate this. Granted, it's not perfect scale because the soldiers are 1/35ths tall and the tanks are 1/28ths roughly, but it does look a ton better. I think it would be much simpler and much cheaper for everyone who's already invested hundreds of dollars into their collection. And even though Cobi has improved their figurines over the years, I don't think there are many Cobi fans who would care if they changed them. I mean, look at this. The legs don't allow the figure to sit, and there's no back attachment point like on Mega Constructs. So the figures literally bounce loose all the time. There's a ton of room to improve. So, now that we've discussed the history, the misconceptions, and the scale itself, let me bridge the gap and tell you my actual opinion. I'm someone who doesn't really care about the scale at all. I'm of the opinion that as long as the set looks good and is sturdy, I could care less. The three biggest issues about going to 1/35th scale to me are the tracks not being able to roll, the fact that I can't build smaller tanks like the CV33 without missing a ton of features, and the fact that everything built at 1/35th scale falls apart because it's so delicate. I don't really care what scale Cobi chooses at the end of the day, but I do care about the quality of my sets. This Pack 40 is just bad. I think there's this magical misconception out there that Cobi will be able to pull a rabbit out of the hat and provide some perfect small pieces that will fix every problem at 1/35th scale, but I don't think that's possible. Lego style blocks can only get so small. I mean, look at what Cobi's already been doing and what Brickmania is currently doing. The worst part is that they look at the Cobi MOC Builders and think that their sets are perfect and say, well, they can do it, so why can't Cobi? But I've built at that scale, and I've had to scrap over 50 projects and start completely over again at 1/28 scale due to how delicate they were. 1/35 scale is just a really bad scale. I would argue that the real issue here has always been the figurines and not the tanks themselves, since the biggest problem that most people have is that the soldier scale does not look good when compared to the tank scale. But what are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comments. I'm actually fascinated to hear what you guys have to say, because when Arthur put that poll up, I literally dropped everything to make this video. While this video may not fix the problem, I hope it sheds some light on the scale issues that LEGO has created, and clears up a lot of the misconceptions about 1/35 scale. I was honestly surprised just how much misinformation was out there. I mean, in the beginning, I was a 1/35 fanboy too, but after building 100 plus MOCs at this point, I now know why Cobi doesn't build more at that scale. It's just a really bad scale if you like details and functionality. Regardless, more content to come. The MOC tour is up next. And don't worry, I'll be just as harsh on my own MOCs as I was on all those other awesome MOC builders. So, if you're planning on making fun of me down in the comments, just give me a couple of months. Most people say they're their own worst critic, but I'm my own worst firing squad.
Ready? Aim!
A special thanks to all the MOC builders that made this video possible. Their info will be in the description down below and on the screen. Anyways, thank you for watching. You're all truly wonderful. Bye for now.